I love and honestly hate gimbals. They get awesome stable footage without much effort, but they can also be big, annoying, and really get in the way of your creativity. But they are a necessary tool in the kit, so I was looking for a nice, simple, and compact gimbal that can still hold a decent sized camera like this one here. One that's travel friendly and more or less frustration free. So I came across the Zhiyun Weebill-S and the feiyu-tech AK2000S, both claiming to fold down to less than the size of an A4 sheet of paper. So today we're going to put them head to head and talk about which is the better gimbal and which is the better value. And the answer to each of those questions is actually different. So stick around, let's get into it. Hey, what's up? I'm Scott and welcome to my channel. And if you're new here, please do make sure to subscribe for more no-nonsense tutorials and reviews. Today, like I said, we're comparing these two gimbals right here, and I'll try to keep it organized. So here's the timeline. Skip ahead if you'd like. The times will be below the video as well, so you can just click and skip ahead easily. First up, people want to see footage. So let's take a look at a couple of simple test shots and talk about the differences in performance of these two gimbals. So I only did each of these clips in maybe 1 or 2 takes, and I left them a little bit raw on purpose just so you get more of the real experience and not an overly polished example of each. I switched back and forth about which gimbal I shot with first in each spot, and I filmed it all in straight 24 frames per second with no in-lens or in-camera stabilization on the Sony A7S III. Basically, this is as raw as it will get. There's some tilting, panning, spinning, following. Some of it was on very uneven ground, some underslung, some lifted way overhead. It was shot between 24 and 35 millimeters, either using pan follow or full follow modes. Things like the roll follow and inception roll are kind of special cases in my opinion, and I don't think they really matter for a basic gimbal comparison like this. So for actual performance, there really were only a couple of small differences aside from obvious user error or just natural differences that happen from one shot to the next. One was that the feiyu-tech did seem to be a bit smoother and I guess less sudden or jerky with movements on panning motion and things like that. It was pretty minimal though, especially when I look back at the footage. And I do want to point out that these tests were done without spending a whole lot of time fine-tuning things like deadpan and all that in the menus. But in any case, I have found that difference to be generally true of Zhiyun gimbals versus feiyu-tech gimbals in the past as well, so I'll let it slide and I'll count it as a difference here. So now with all that said, they both do a fine job in terms of actual stabilization, and it will be much more important how careful you are with your technique and how much you plan and practice your shots. So what did make a huge difference between these two gimbals for me is just a handful of physical differences that affect how the whole experience is. So that's what we're going to get into right now. I won't touch on absolutely every little aspect of these like apps and follow focus accessories and things like that, because like I said, the main focus of this for me is a simple, portable, hassle-free gimbal, and that all adds up to, well, not having it all decked out. So I'll be as complete as I can in the things that I think really stood out to me, which generally fall under design, usability, portability, and of course, value. Build quality is a pretty simple category to talk about. The Zhiyun Weebill-S is by and large a lot of plastic, while the feiyu-tech is pretty much entirely made of metal and even wood on the grip here. So in terms of pure build quality, feiyu-tech wins hands down. But do keep in mind that although the Zhiyun here is largely plastic, it hasn't given me any concerns that it's going to break easily or even that it can't stand up to at least a little bit of abuse. Both of these gimbals do have locks on all 3 axes, which can of course be nice when you're carrying this around, so not everything's flapping all around, but also it can help you to isolate one axis at a time when you're getting balance. But generally speaking, being picky here, I much prefer the locks on the Zhiyun Weebill-S. It's really hard to put into words, but something about the locks on the feiyu-tech just feel a little bit off to me. Maybe if I used only this gimbal, I could definitely get used to it, but going back and forth between these two, I did feel some frustration or annoyance with the locks on the feiyu-tech. I just feel like they're a little bit softer, or they don't click really all the way into place as confidently. Something about them feels squishy or loose, I don't know. Again, it's hard to put into words, but it's a small detail, however, a very convenient feature of these gimbals, so I like that the Zhiyun tech just works and feels like it works nicely, easily, and smoothly. These do both have pretty unique quick release systems. Now, both of them are a double plate system. The feiyu-tech has a double Arca Swiss design, one that slides front and back, the other slides side to side. And then the Zhiyun has an Arca Swiss plate that snaps into a Manfrotto compatible plate. Now, personally, I prefer the system on the Zhiyun here, and my only complaint about it is that it can actually be a little bit sticky sometimes. It can be a little bit tricky to get it in and out, but generally speaking, I do think that this is the better quick release system. One of the reasons for that is that the Zhiyun has a truly no rebalance necessary quick release system. If you take off that Arca Swiss plate and then snap it back in, where it snaps in is exactly in the same position. So as long as nothing else changed, you don't have to rebalance anything on the gimbal, and it's much faster. With the feiyu-tech, you can use either that rear side sliding Arca Swiss plate or the front and back sliding plate. But in either case, when you remove it, you're going to have to remember exactly where it was lined up if you don't want to have to rebalance it again, and that's just not something that my brain can handle. Also, it seems like there's a little bit more clearance from the quick release mount back to the rear motor on the Zhiyun than there is on the feiyu-tech, meaning that you can get a little bit more front and back adjustment, which helps to balance heavier or more front heavy or larger cameras than you can fit onto the feiyu-tech, even if it is within the weight limit, the capacity of this gimbal. You have a little bit more clearance, and things like the flip out rear screen here have bumped up against this rear motor a lot more easily on the feiyu-tech than the Zhiyun. For example, this setup here, I just cannot balance on the Zhiyun. This is the A7S III with a cage and with the Sigma 24-70. I just can't balance it on this gimbal, but I can here because I have a little bit more clearance. It's not that the motors can't necessarily handle it, I just have a little bit more physical clearance with the design of the quick release plate, but also of just the position of the arms here. If you choose to use the bottom Arca Swiss plate on the feiyu-tech, so you have that front and back adjustment, which you don't get if you're sliding side to side with the top plate, then to get more clearance between the plate and this back motor, you have to completely remove this knob, which requires you to actually unscrew it and then just remove that whole top part of the plate. It's not something that is quick and easy to do, not something you necessarily want to do unless you're always going to use it that way. Now, as for the cross compatibility of those quick release plates, other Arca Swiss plates that I've tried do fit on that back side to side section of the feiyu-tech double Arca Swiss plate, but my Arca Swiss plates can't slide through on the bottom section because of the little safety screws that are in the bottom of it that get in the way. Now, most Manfrotto style plates do seem to fit onto the Zhiyun if you remove everything, as long as they're not too wide, but because of the Arca Swiss release design, the quick release design, other Arca Swiss plates don't fit onto that top part of that double plate. But this Arca Swiss plate does work oppositely on Arca Swiss heads, with the exception that the little part sticking out in the front on the bottom means that it won't slide all the way backwards. Did you get all that? The feiyu-tech's grip is far better with a dedicated wooden grip here, which is comfortable and out of the way of the controls on the back. Zhiyun has all the controls on the bottom part here, and unless you have a second tripod on the bottom, it can sometimes be tricky to pick it up or to hold it without mashing those buttons. The little quick release that they do sell for quickly switching the mini tripod from the back to the bottom here, or just quickly removing it in general, is really handy, and it is an extra separate thing you have to buy, which is unfortunate, but it's really handy. Now, I think that from the start, Zhiyun should have just included that quick release in the kit. It really would have bumped up the value and functionality of this even a little bit more, and to have to spend an extra 25, 30, 40, 50 bucks on one or two of these is just a shame. I think it's absolutely worth it, don't get me wrong, and I did buy it myself, but I think they should have just included it from the start. Also, keep in mind that while I do have a second mini tripod on the bottom here, this did only come with one mini tripod that I have on the back at the moment here. So you'll have to either switch this between the bottom and the back, depending on if you're using it in underslung mode or standard pistol grip mode, or just spend a couple bucks and get another tripod like I did, and you can have one on both sides, and they can both be quickly released if you get two of those quick release kits, which you need to anyway if you want to have the second receiver on the bottom. Even if you get one kit, you can't switch it to the bottom without a second receiver. It's kind of weird. On the other hand, feiyu-tech messed up even more here on a greatly missed opportunity. You need 3 tiny little screws to attach or detach their rear grip here. And it's not even toolless. There is a little magnetic slot on here that you can keep the tool in, but it's not toolless, and there are 3 and they're tiny. Honestly, it's a nightmare if you're in a rush, and after attaching this, you have to remove it to pack it away again, and of course to maintain that A4 page of paper compact size that they advertise about. Plus, on top of all that, my hand barely fits on here, and the grip is a little bit slippery. There's no contour, and the material can get slippery, especially with sweaty hands. Basically, they could have done this much better. Again, it's a huge missed opportunity for them to bring this gimbal from, as it is, okay, but kind of annoying, up to being spectacular if that rear grip was easily removed. Now, in terms of controls, the Zhiyun Weebill-S has all physical buttons. Of course, there's a little screen on there, but it's all physical buttons and knobs. And of course, the feiyu-tech does have some buttons and knobs as well, but they've got their fantastic touchscreen interface here, and I love it. It's fast and easy and intuitive. Plus, it's all out of the way from that lower grip. You have clearance for it, and the screen, the view of the screen is not obstructed by anything like it is on the Zhiyun here. You got all the buttons down below this rear arm, and it can be hard to see the screen. Sometimes it's awkward and a little bit tricky to figure out what you're doing on there. Just generally speaking, the controls are much better thought out and implemented on the feiyu-tech. We will also come back to a little bit more about these controls in just a minute. Now, in terms of the batteries, the Zhiyun Weebill-S has standard removable batteries, rechargeable batteries, of course, and the AK2000S has built-in batteries that are fast charge, but it's all internal. You have to use a USB cable plugged straight into the gimbal. I don't think either really wins here. It just depends on your shooting style and personal preferences, but I suspect that a lot of people are going to prefer removable batteries since they're easier to replace on a long day of shooting or even just over years of use. Plus, you don't have to bring the whole gimbal close to the charger when you want to charge it like you do with feiyu-tech. Now, these gimbals themselves are actually not as similar in size as you might expect, since they do both advertise that A4 paper size form factor. With the rear grips attached, which is how most people will use them, you can see here the difference in size. It's not huge, but it is there, and keep in mind, this rear grip is not easy to remove. In terms of weight, they're really not that different. If you add on that second tripod on the bottom of the Zhiyun, so that way they're kind of similar like that, they both come in at about 1.5 kilograms. Now, we already talked about those quick release systems on these two gimbals, and that for me contributes to the usability of these, so keep that in mind. Also, the roll axis balancing on Zhiyun is a little bit weird because the arm itself doesn't slide left and right, only that entire base plate itself slides left and right with a lock lever underneath the actual camera. It does take some getting used to, and I feel like it's harder to make small adjustments once you've already locked it down and you have to unlock it again. feiyu-tech is a lot more standard in this case with this little lock on the rear motor, and I think that's a good thing. But that's really all there is to the differences in balancing, again, except those axis locks, which we already talked about, and I prefer the locks on the Zhiyun. Now, once again, the rear grip and quick release system on the Zhiyun for that rear grip, is extra, but it's made a world's difference in how much I actually wanted to use it and how quick and easy it was to take this out, get set up, and then get put back away again. That goes a long way for me in usability and ease of use, which basically the same thing, so anyone gonna call me out on that? Also, the capacity for slightly off-balanced or physically larger cameras. Even within the weight limit, feiyu-tech didn't handle unbalanced cameras as well as Zhiyun does. I don't know the damage it's gonna do in the long run on the motors, but Zhiyun did work when it was poorly balanced almost as well as when it's properly balanced, as long as it's just a little bit off. And feiyu-tech really did need near perfect balance to work at all, or else the motors just couldn't really handle the weight. Of course, it does depend on how badly it's balanced, but generally, Zhiyun did a better job here. And yes, I know, just balance it properly and there's no issue. But with zoom lenses like the 24-70 or even the 16-35, it's really nice to balance them in the middle, and then you can have that little bit of zoom in or zoom out without needing to spend the time rebalancing it every time in running gun situations. So I do think that that matters. On the Zhiyun, you have speed, smooth, and deadband adjustments in the menu. I had them all set to default in my test that we showed earlier in this video. And on the feiyu-tech, you get follow speed and dead zone adjustments. Again, I had them at default right in the middle, but it is good to see that both of these gimbals can be fairly deeply customized in those ways. The Weebill-S has a physical switch to go back and forth between pan, follow, and lock modes, and you use the trigger to get into full follow mode. Now you can set in the menu if it goes into that mode only while you're holding down the trigger, or if it stays in that mode just by clicking the trigger once. And it's not a huge deal, but that combined with POV having another dedicated button and the function button for go mode, it just feels like the controls are kind of all over the place. With feiyu-tech, you get the very organized and simple touchscreen control for everything, pretty much everything, including, of course, changing your follow mode. Also, both of these gimbals do have wheels on the grips, and I didn't bother testing them in depth. It's just not a detail that I really care about in terms of having the follow focus and all this stuff, because I'm looking for a hassle-free gimbal. But the wheel on the feiyu-tech can be pushed to switch between controlling the tilt, the pan, and the roll axis when it's not in use otherwise. And the Zhiyun wheel doesn't seem to have any secondary functions besides focus. Again, each of these may have some more complex functions, but it's all kind of specialty beyond these things. And yeah, let's just leave that for another video. feiyu-tech gimbals now and in the past have felt a little bit more shaky when you use them in underslung mode, at least in my experience. Some of their upper level gimbals didn't show that issue quite as much, but I have noticed it before, and it did show up a little bit at times with the AK2000S as well. Not always, but sometimes. And I just never noticed it on Zhiyun. Generally speaking, feiyu-tech gimbals have always felt a little bit more touchy and sensitive to small differences in things like motor strength, at least to me. The new giant Crane 3S from Zhiyun was also like that, but with most of their gimbals, their smaller ones, including this one here, it just hasn't seemed to make much of a difference, and that does make it easier to use. All right, finally, value. For me, I think feiyu-tech gets better value almost hands down. I mean, you get a fuller, more complete kit included by far, because it's actually around $100 cheaper than the Zhiyun, even with all that's included here. And you even get a carry case, which Zhiyun just doesn't really have. I don't really need one, to be honest, since my goal is to be portable, and I'll probably just throw this in a backpack or wrap it around a shoulder strap 99% of the time, but hey, it's included. The feiyu-tech also has better controls, better quality, build quality, and better ergonomics besides that annoying rear grip. However, for me, the Zhiyun wins overall, and I will be using it as my A gimbal for these small to medium-sized camera setups. It just has more capacity in terms of actual functional use, has more clearance for front-heavy cameras or slightly physically larger cameras. It's less touchy with motor strength and imperfect balance. It's undoubtedly more compact, thanks in part to a much better rear grip design, although yes, that extra separate accessory does make it even better. It has Manfrotto and Arca Swiss plates with more front-to-back adjustment, cross-compatibility, and a true no rebalance quick release system, which for me, again, is huge. And no, Zhiyun didn't pay me, because actually I bought the Weebill-S with my own money, and feiyu-tech did send me the AK2000S for free for the review. I mean, this is a great gimbal. I just think that they need to step it up in a few key usability areas. I mean, it's durable, it has a great interface, and it's a great value, but Zhiyun is more portable, powerful, and quick. Yes, this is the recap, by the way, for those of you who skipped ahead, so I'm sorry for repeating myself. So anyway, I hope that could help you. It's really complex, I think, but if you have any other questions, let me know down below and I will do my best to get back to you. And remember that these gimbals are just a tool, and the one that worked best for you, for whatever reason it is the one that you should choose. Nowadays, they all do a fantastic job of actually stabilizing your footage if you use them right and within their limitations with good technique. But I hope this helped you understand what those limitations are for each of these two gimbals here. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, like, share, and all that good stuff, and I'll see you next time.